Hello and welcome everyone to I'm sorry, let me start all over again. So hello, welcome everybody. We're happy to have you here on the Garden Hour with MU Extension. We love to meet with you each week and provide you with answers and information about your lawn, your gardens, whether it be vegetable or flower gardens, container growing, trees, landscape, all of those kinds of questions. We just love it. And that's why we are in the job that we do. So my name is Debbie Kelly. I'm a horticulture specialist and I am located in Jefferson County, which is just south of St. Louis. We have a great group of folks that are going to be with us today answering some of your questions. And I'll just share with you the map. We have a tendency to show this each week so that you all can become familiar with who we are, where we're located, and a contact information if you would like to reach out to us. If you notice that any of the positions are open, don't fret. Any other one of us are more than happy to answer those questions for you. And remember that pictures are real helpful, especially if you can email them to us. They can help us to identify a lot of issues and a lot of things that we can see that could be potentially occurring with some of your plants. If you think that you've got a disease or an insect issue, or you just really don't know what's going on. And we've added that as a feature into the Garden Hour. So when you go back, if you've got pictures or questions and you go back to subscribing, and that's where the questions can be then submitted into, there's a little button there that you can click and it'll say upload your photos. And so we're really happy to do that. One of our questions today came in like that. So we're glad that you guys are starting to use that feature. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and get us jump started with the weather, and I'm going to let Pat Guinan take over for us.
Sounds good. Thank you, Debbie, and good afternoon, everyone. Well, we've wrapped up 1 week of June, and temperatures have been fairly seasonal for the first week of June, so not a bad thing here in Missouri. On the left are the departure from normals over the past week across the country. You can see where the warmth is across generally the eastern third of the U.S., the southern parts of Texas, Southwest, West Coast, right here in the middle of the country. Actually very cool up in the northern plains and upper Midwest, and somewhat more seasonal as we go into Missouri. Just to our east, it's a little bit more above average. And here on the right, you can see we're anywhere from generally a slightly below to slightly above average, perhaps a little cooler over west central southwest sections, a little bit milder across the far northeastern east central Missouri. Not bad considering what things can be like in our state during the month of June. It's been a wet one too, a wet week for that matter. And on the left, even over just the past 24 hours, we had a significant rain event roll across the state, especially the northern half of Missouri with some of the bigger totals. These are CoCoRa's reports that came in this morning. So it's a 24-hour total ending at 7 a.m. this morning. Those yellows and reds and oranges are where the biggest totals fell overnight. Really big rains up in the northwest corner of the state, 1 to 2 inches, almost 3 inches up here in Atchison and Hope County, some big totals. Most parts of northern Missouri saw an inch or more, lighter totals as you go over parts of southern and southeastern Missouri. There were some activity, some scattered storms yesterday right around Denton County over in Pulaski County. They were isolated, but boy, if you were under it, it dropped a lot of rainfall, nearly 3 inches here in eastern Denton County, 2.08 inches here in southeastern Pulaski County. These are some of the totals. I have a table showing these CoCoRa's reports. You can look at some of the locations. These are the highest rainfall reports that I could find of the few hundred reports that came in as of this morning. Again, most of these counties that are in northwest Missouri, the northwest corner of the state, where we saw some of the biggest totals. On the right are radar estimates over the past week. Some other systems moved through Missouri and brought additional rainfall. Heaviest totals across the northwestern parts. Generally, the northern half of the state saw the highest rainfall, most likely due to the recent system that moved through. We had another system impact southwest Missouri with some big totals, as well as southeastern sections of the state. Around the Boot Hill, we've had some decent accumulations. These darker greens are anywhere from about 1 inch to 2 inches. The yellows are 2 or more inches. And these shades right here in some of the northwest corner, they had over 3 inches over the past week. A little bit, some dry pockets here in mid-Missouri, right around just north of St. Louis, and a little bit area of drier conditions here in southeast Missouri. But overall, it's been a fairly wet week across the Show Me State. From about 10 minutes ago, these are looking at the Missouri Mesonet stations. Generally, temperatures are running in the upper 60s to lower 70s. looking at this area right here is generally where the cloud cover is. You can see where these cooler conditions, those clouds are suppressing the temperatures. More sunshine across northern and southern parts of the state. We even have some low 80s across parts of southeastern Missouri as of 11:50 a.m. this morning. Soil temperatures are also running somewhat seasonable, generally in the low to middle 70s and some other upper 60s in more of the cloudier areas. And on the far right, you can see these are the totals from the rain gauges from the Mesonet since midnight. And some of the biggest totals I see right here, about 1.5 inches in Monroe City, 9,300s over in Vandalia, about an inch, almost 1.5 inches around Brunswick. Trenton here in Grundy County picked up about 1.25 inches. So some decent totals, especially across the northern half of the state since midnight. It does look like things are going to clear out more so as we go through the day and the afternoon. It looks like a very nice afternoon shaping up. Those rains are right now in the southwest corner of the state. The rest of the state is looking pretty dry right now. Seasonable temperatures, generally highs in the mid 70s to lower 80s. A very nice day tomorrow before the next system moves in for tomorrow night and Friday morning. But generally a nice day tomorrow with highs in the upper 70s, lower 80s. Again, that's very seasonable for this time of year. There is a potential here in the upper right. This yellow shading does indicate with that next system impacting our state tomorrow night into Friday, some heavy precip is possible in this yellow area covering much of Kansas, and that does clip the southwestern part of the state. Something to keep an eye on as we get into tomorrow night and Friday for some potential flooding across those far southwestern sections. Temperatures here, low temperatures for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It does look like a very nice weekend shaping up. That system will clear out later in the day on Friday. Low temperatures Friday morning, generally in the lower 60s, but look at these daytime highs on Friday, generally in the mid to upper 70s. Very nice weather as we go later in the day on Friday. I think Saturday perhaps could be the pick day of the week. Lows Saturday morning, generally in the upper 50s, with highs in the upper 70s and low 80s, with mostly sunshine and little to no chances of precipitation. If there is any precipitation on Saturday, that perhaps could impact far southern parts of the state, wherever that frontal boundary stalls out. They're thinking in Arkansas, that could trigger some scattered activity across far southern Missouri on Saturday. We start to see the heat coming on Sunday. Nice morning, lows in the low 60s, but look at these highs here in the lower right, generally in the mid to upper 80s. And next week does look very warm, and I'll show that after this slide. But these are the totals over the next 3 days of the estimates of precipitation. It does look like the highest likelihood of heavy precip on Thursday night into Friday morning will generally be across southern Missouri, especially southwestern sections where they don't need it. It's exceptionally wet in that area, but anywhere from a 1/2 inch to as much as 2 inches in this far southwestern corner is expected. And again, it really depends on where this system develops on Thursday night into Friday morning. Of course, this could change. Just keep an eye on it, but they are indicating the lightest amount of precip perhaps across northern parts of the state. Additional rainfall with another system could impact Iowa and parts of northern Illinois. Generally for the state, though, anywhere from about 1/4 to 1 inch is anticipated, with the localized heavier amounts under the heavier thunderstorms. I talked about the heat is on starting next week. We're going to get a little bit of a taste of that on Sunday with highs in the mid to upper 80s. A high likelihood of above normal temperatures pretty much for all of next week. This indicates right here, these reds, these shades of reds. The deeper that shade, the higher the confidence that this forecast will verify. You can see the models have a pretty good consensus or grasp on what they think the weather pattern will be like next week. And we're going to be right in the summertime, and it's going to feel like a hot July. I wouldn't be surprised to see daytime highs through much of next week into the upper 80s and 90s, and high humidity, so it will be uncomfortable as well. And with that ridge of high pressure right across the middle part of the country, that will inhibit much precipitation formation. So it looks like a fairly dry period next week with above normal temperatures and below normal precipitation. Debbie, that's pretty much a weather report. I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. It's nice to know what the weather is going to happen so we can plan not only our events, but work in our yards to make it look as beautiful as we possibly can. What I'd like to do now is go ahead and turn it over to Jennifer. She's going to be our moderator for today. So Jennifer, let's get started.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. We had a question that came in, and it's about oak trees. And the question is that the tree was planted in December of 2021. And yesterday, the client noticed that some of the leaves were turning brown, and it seems like they may have been eaten by something, but they don't see any insects. So they're wondering what is going on. And I want to turn this over to Justin to give us some thoughts on this.
Sure. Get my PowerPoint pulled up here. So these were the pictures one of the pictures that I was received from the homeowner. Some of the leaves appeared to be chewed on and be eaten across different parts of the tree. I didn't necessarily have all the information on this from the pictures, but got a little bit more information later from the homeowner as well. So this is in the white oak family. You can tell by the rounded leaf tips as opposed to the red oak families, like our pin oaks that we had all the problems with the galls on and the chlorosis. But if we take a look at these pictures here, we can see that there's definitely some insect damage on some of these leaves. Looking at some of the common insect pests, the shot hole leaf miners produce those just kind of buckshot looking holes through the leaves. There's tons of different caterpillar pests that consume oaks, and you can see they skeletonize the leaves where they leave the leaf ribs in place. There's some aphids that can consume oaks. There's an oak slug sawfly, which will leave this papery looking material where they don't necessarily consume the entire leaf. They leave that papery material behind. And then occasional damage by May or June beetles, as they're commonly known, can produce holes throughout the leaf, as well as a little bit of chewing on the leaf margins. So I took a look at these pictures to try to get an idea if any of them applied, if any of the insects were involved in consuming these leaves. So I didn't really see the skeletonization. The leaf ribs were consumed by whatever insect was here. They were eaten from the margins. There wasn't holes in the middle of them, so it doesn't look like any kind of beetles or leaf miners. The leaf tissue is fully consumed, so we know that it's not sawfly. Aphids don't produce this kind of damage, but there's no aphid presence or any sooty mold presence on the leaves. So this one is really tricky and is going to require further investigation to see if we can come up with a potential pest that caused this damage on these oak trees. Oak trees might suffer from insect damage when they're being established, but generally after the first couple of years, insect damage isn't too much of a concern on oak trees. So like when we think about cultural requirements of oak trees in this white oak group, they like full sun, moist and well-drained soils. They do have a little bit acidic pH preference, which plays into this next point about chlorosis. Chlorosis can cause yellowing of leaves. We generally see this more like in our pin oaks, but it can happen to white oaks. I don't know exactly where this tree is in the landscape, but a lot of times in soil around the home or soil by the street or in newer subdivisions, that soil has been all jumbled up, so it might not necessarily have a native soil pH. It might have subsoil mixed in that caused the soil pH to raise. But that chlorosis is caused by a lack of iron. And basically there may be iron in the soil, but because of the soil pH conditions, it's not accessible by the tree. These trees don't tolerate root disturbances like soil compaction or any root cutting. So I got an email from the homeowner just right before we started here. So it appears that there's some yellowing of the leaves of the tree. So we might be looking at a chlorosis issue. On a small tree like this, a soil test could help get an idea of where that soil pH is. And then if we need to lower the soil pH, there are ways to apply sulfur around the base of the tree. So white oaks, just a couple of fun facts. It's a really critical food source for wildlife. There's tons of timber products, including barrels for wines and spirits. The highest concentration of white oak harvested for barrels does come from southern Missouri and Kentucky. And these are used for bourbon and whiskey all across the world. So that's what I have on white oaks and oak damage.
Okay, thank you, Justin. It is now time for our weekly friend or foe with Tamara.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and get it up. And I'm also going to activate the poll. You should be able to see this at this point. Hopefully, computer's acting a little bit funny. I can't seem to activate the poll. If I could get one of the other co-hosts to be able to do the poll, that would be awesome. Are you guys able to see?
Yes.
Here we go. All right. So my computer's just being a little bit funny. Okay. And thank you to whoever activated the poll. So you guys can see the poll. Go ahead and tell us whether this is a friend, foe, neither, or it depends. Give you a few seconds to do that. Guys are putting in your votes. That's good. All right. I'm going to give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and let's talk about this. Most of you said that this is a foe. We have a couple of you who said this is a friend and one of you who said that it depends. All right, so let's talk about this. All right, so this is a cucumber beetle, specifically the spotted cucumber beetle. Now, there actually is another one that's called the cucumber beetle, and this one is the striped cucumber beetle. So let's talk about, is this friend or is it foe? And I said it is a foe. Both of these cucumber beetles are actually considered foes. So what makes this a foe? Well, first let's talk about the biology. It's a small beetle. It can be about 1/5 of an inch. It actually, one of them can be a little bit smaller than that. They feed on cucurbits and other crops. They typically are emerging a little bit before now, so end of April through mid-May, though you still can definitely see them because that's when they were emerging. The grubs also can cause damage in the oh, there we go. They also can cause damage for the roots. So we're talking about a dual-sided attack, both on the leaves as well as underground. And to be able to tell the difference, other than the spotted versus the striped, they also have different habitat or different habits. So one will come in when it's really hot with large numbers, and it just seems like the population just explodes, compared to the spotted cucumber, which actually can show up a little bit earlier, but there's usually few of them. One of the biggest concerns for this are the adults can actually vector a disease that can be pretty devastating to a crop. That's bacterial wilt, which we don't want to have in our crops. So what can we do about it? You can hand pick these off in a home situation. You can make sure you don't just toss them to the side because they'll come back, but drop them into a bucket of soapy water. Also, if you maintain good weed control, that is one way to kind of help, especially if you do have to put pesticides out there. It can help it so that you get better coverage, as well as being able to get all parts of it and not have to waste as much or use as much. If you keep your crops healthy, it can reduce the crop stress, which means that the plants are going to be able to handle the pressures that these beetles are putting on them. So there's also trap cropping that you can do. Blue Hubbard squash is a good one to use. You'd put out transplants a little bit earlier because these beetles, as well as squash beetle or squash bug, they tend to like Blue Hubbard squash better than most of the stuff you're going to put in your garden. So if you put the trap crops out there, then as a highly attractive crop, the insects will actually go to that first so that you can see when they are coming, when they're there, what kind of numbers they're in. And it also makes it easier to treat the beetles at the trap crop rather than going through all of your other crops. I did put some tips there for commercial growers as well. But for commercial growers, if they can use these other IPM strategies, that works for them as well. So that's what I have for cucumber beetle. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Well, grass is such a problem in a lot of our flower beds, like our iris bed or strawberry bed, maybe asparagus. And we often wonder, what can we use or what can we do to get rid of those weeds? Well, Katie is going to tell us today what to do.
So for weed control, you do have several options. I always tell people my number one favorite weed control method is organic mulches. In order to help prevent those weeds from coming up to begin with. However, after the weeds are there, and grasses can be very hard. You can hand pull them out or dig them out. That can be hard to do. So we do have herbicide options for grasses. So herbicides work in that the plant has to be, number one, it has to be actively growing. And then herbicides can be selective. So in this case, we are looking at a herbicide that just controls grasses. It doesn't control broadleaves. So long as you don't have any ornamental grasses or in your garden area, if that's a flower garden, or in the vegetable garden, corn is the only grass plant that we have. But I just did a quick Google search of some of the trade names for some of these products. Grass beater is one, grass getter is another, ornament is one, grass killer is one, and grass begone. Notice that all except one have grass in the name. So if you are going to use a herbicide, remember to read that label to make sure it is labeled for one, the plant you're trying to control, in this case grasses, and that it's also labeled or see what specific instructions it has as far as what crops it can be applied on or over the top of. As always, with reading that label, remember to wear your personal protective equipment that is on that label, and remember that the label is the law. But those are some options to help control those pesky weeds in the garden.
All right, thank you, Katie. I'm now going to talk about pinching plants. And there are at least two plants, maybe more, that need to be pinched to have a bushier, more compact appearance in the fall. And that is the asters and the chrysanthemums. And asters and chrysanthemums are two of my favorite fall flowers. There are several different kinds of asters out there, and I grow a few at the extension office here in Kirksville, as well as at my house. Well, let's first talk about what pinching is. Well, pinching is removing the primary bud or the growing tips on each stem, which diverts energy into the side buds. And when I pinch, I'm pinching off about 2 to 3 inches of that top growth of the shoot. So it promotes the growth of side buds or side shoots, and it does create a bushier, more compact appearance rather than being tall and leggy. You want to start doing this in mid-spring and pinch through at least the 4th of July. And again, if you don't do this, your asters are going to get tall. They may split in the center as they get heavy with flowers, and they'll have a leggy appearance. These are photos that I took this morning. I went out and pinched an aster here at the Adair County Extension Center. It's a New England aster, and it had not been pinched yet. So you can see I'm taking out about the top 3 inches of that stem. And I did every stem in the plant, and that will promote side buds and side shoots. And it's going to keep that plant shorter and bushier, and it will have more flowers. So here's a before and an after. This is an aster, New England aster, that was not pinched back. And you can see what it does. So it gets tall, it gets leggy, the shoots fall over. It's still pretty, I guess you could say. And it attracted a lot of insects, but it had that wild appearance. So to keep it more in bounds, not so wild looking, I should have pruned that back or pinched that back several times between mid-spring and the 4th of July. And here is an aster that I did keep pinched back, and you can see it stayed more compact and bushier. And again, I really like asters. They are one of my favorite fall flowers. And the reason is they attract a lot of insects. I get a lot of bees, flies, butterflies, and in this photo, you see a monarch butterfly. And then you do the same with chrysanthemums. If you want a bushier, smaller, compact chrysanthemum, be sure you're pinching it back from mid-spring until about the 4th of July. And if you don't, and your chrysanthemums are several years old, they will be taller. They may get heavy with the flowers. They may split in the center, fall over. So those are the reasons why we want to keep our asters and chrysanthemums pinched back. And it will also promote a lot of flowers. As you can see, this chrysanthemum is covered in yellow flowers. And that's all I have on this topic. Okay, our next topic is fertilizing cool season lawns. And Manoj is going to talk about that.
All right. Yeah, so let's talk about our lawns and how to do proper fertilizer in our lawn. Just to be on the same page here, let's look at what our cool season lawns are and our warm season lawns. So the cool season lawns, tall fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, perennial ryegrass, and some of the annual ryegrass we can see, and fine fescue. These all types of grass species we can find in Missouri. For the warm season lawns, we have Georgia grass, maybe not much of Bermuda grass or buffalo grass, but it's not surprising to find some of them in the southern Missouri. There are other types of warm season species, but we don't find them in Missouri. So just these are the lawns basically when we talk about warm season and cool season lawns in Missouri. Now let's talk about how to manage proper fertilizers in those types of lawns. First and foremost, let's go with the timing. When do we actually put down fertilizers? So here in the cool season lawns, again, the lawns are not same for all homeowners. They vary on the purpose and objectives of the homeowners. And let's say we can divide the lawns in general in low maintenance, medium maintenance, and high maintenance lawn. For the low maintenance lawn, the best time to add fertilizers in your cool season, like tall fescue or Kentucky bluegrass, is the month of September. Any in early, mid, or late September. Any day in September will be the ideal timing. If you have resource and time to do 2 applications of fertilizers, then you should time your fertilizers in the month of September and then in October to November. Or you can also do one time in fall and one time in spring, and then the spring timing will be anytime between April and May. And for some of you who want to have like high maintenance lawn, have lots of green lawns, especially for the perennial ryegrass and Kentucky bluegrass, those are high maintenance lawn. You may add fertilizers 3 times in a year, 2 times in the fall, and 1 time in the spring. Now, some of you might say, okay, why are we talking about this thing now? Because we already clearly missed the timing for spring. So then again, some of you might think, okay, I missed the timing in spring. Now, can I add fertilizer now or anytime later after June? And the answer is no. Okay, first let's talk about before, in early spring, before April, when you apply fertilizers, the fertilizer is going to just sit down there, and it's not going to work. So it's not very effective. It's a lot of wastage there because your grass has not developed good root systems or the overall plant systems to take up the fertilizers down to the roots. Now, anytime after June and later in the mid-summer, early summer, it's not an ideal time to fertilize your cool season lawn, because all that's going to do is help build vegetative growth. And when we talk about lawns, we know that we are focusing more on developing roots. Okay, to develop good root system, we need to put down fertilizers when the grass is not too vigorously growing in terms of vegetative growth. Okay, so anytime in the midsummer, late summer, all that fertilizers are gonna metabolize too quickly as they are growing so fast, and it promotes the lost vegetative growth. And not only it weakens the root systems, but also it makes the grass susceptible to fungal diseases in summer. The stress or the vigor of the plant in overall will be weakened, so it cannot tolerate drought stress, heat stress, and things like that. So adding fertilizers in summer generally has more bad things for your lawns than the good things. So if you have missed the fertilizer in spring, so do not have temptations to go and add fertilizers now. You have to wait until fall. Okay. Now, fertilizer timing in warm season lawn. So for the warm season, these are different animals when we compare to cool season lawns. Warm season lawns like Georgia grass, even Bermuda grass, if you have, they grow actively in summer. They can take up the summer heat, they can take up drought more than the cool season lawns. So the fertilizer timing for them is in the middle of the summer and early summer as well. So June, July, August. That's the 3 months for fertilizer in warm season. So again, if you categorize them into low maintenance, medium and high maintenance, then if you have just one timing of fertilizer, then you can apply that anytime in July. I think July is the ideal, but anytime in June or August also you can do it. For the medium, if you have 2 applications, then you can do it on June and July. For the high maintenance, again, you can split that into 3 applications, June, July, and August. So if you have a warm season lawn, then now is the best time to start working on the fertilizer. Again, before June, we don't recommend, because your warm season grass is not developed well they have not greened up well from the dormancy, and so it's not ideal for the effective and ideal timing. And what happens if you do go before in August in the fall, anytime after September, what happens is it will promote the vegetative growth. All the fertilizers, mainly the nitrogens, they promote vegetative growth. So that vegetative growth, when you see that in the late fall, that will make your warm season grass stay greener for a longer period of time, and then they will not have enough time to prepare their system for winter dormancy. The plants generally, they acclimatize, they prepare their systems ready for the winter, for the cold freezing temperature. So they will not have that enough time to prepare for that dormancy, and subsequently in the winter they will have more freezing stress, and then in the following spring, you'll see more winter damage. So the best timing will be in the middle of the summer for warm season lawns. Now, how much fertilizers or how to apply? So the first thing first, the fertilizer doses is based on the soil test results in lawns. We recommend to do the soil test every 3 years. All your fertilizers, including your soil amendments like calcium or sulfur, if you have to correct your soil pH, those has to be based on your soil test results, especially the phosphorus fertilizers. Nitrogen is okay to do without having soil test if you do not have a soil test results, but for the phosphorus to add on your lawn, because there's a lot of issue with the phosphorus leaching from your turf, amount of phosphorus that you put on your yard has to be based on the soil test results. So when you do nitrogens applications, then be careful that you should not apply more than 1 pound of actual nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. Okay, so again, I'm saying actual nitrogen, which is different than the fertilizer that you have in a bag, because some of the fertilizers can have like 20% nitrogen, some of them can have 6% nitrogen. So you have to do some math there and find out what is 1 pound of actual nitrogen in that bag. But you should not apply more than 1 pound, and then label should say that. And once you apply the fertilizers, it's recommended to apply at least 1/4 inch of water, especially for the granular fertilizers and the fast release fertilizers. For the slow release, you may be okay with that because it's just gonna metabolize slowly, and with the rain or other future irrigations maybe coming there in the future, and will help. But for the fast release fertilizers, you should irrigate. If you do not have irrigations, then you should time your fertilizer applications with the weather forecast. For the cool season lawns, again, depending on high and low maintenance, 1 to 3 pounds of actual nitrogens per 1,000 square feet per year, okay, for the whole season. So I showed you that you can do 1 spring and 2 fall, so you can time or split that annual dose, like 1 pound at a time and 3 pounds over the year for the cool season. And similarly for the warm season, there's not much difference. It's just the timing. Again, you have like 3 pounds per year dose, then you can split that over 3 months in summer and fulfill that 3 pounds of actual nitrogens per 1,000 square feet. So here I just want to briefly touch about this phosphorus leaching. You know, turf has a good good system to reduce the runoff, whether it's from the rain or other irrigations in your flower beds or trees. It has a good systems to slow down and reduce that runoff. But if you do that in a wrong way, then it's gonna trigger the runoff. If you're gonna put down the fertilizer more nitrogen, more than 1 pound of nitrogens per applications, or you're gonna put down phosphorus when there's no phosphorus recommendations, or you don't have a soil test and you're adding complete fertilizers which has nitrogens, phosphorus, and potassiums, and that is just overdosing, or that is just not necessary on your yard. And if you keep doing that, then you're gonna promote the phosphorus leaching from your yard to the storm water, and all environmental hazards will be there. So please be mindful and careful of what you are adding on your yard, so that you are doing good job on your yard and also helping the environment. So I just want to show you the example from your fertilizer bag. So this is one of the example from Anderson Fertilizers. Maybe you can see the tiny details, but here what it's saying in the label is there is analysis of how much nitrogen it has. 16% nitrogens, 4% potassium, 4% phosphate, and 8% potassium. So this is basically 16, 4, 8, and there are other sulfur, copper, zinc, other micronutrients. So this is a complete fertilizers. Okay, you should add these kinds of complete fertilizers only based on the soil test. If there is no recommendations to add phosphorus or even potassium, then you should not go and put down these kind of fertilizers. Okay, these are again for high maintenance fertilizers. Generally, these are very expensive, premium product as well. But what I'm saying is just don't go and buy complete fertilizers and put down in your yard without doing proper soil test results. Okay. If you do not have soil test, it's a good idea to just buy like a urea, straight urea, if you want to go for cheap options, or if you can also do some slow release nitrogen fertilizers. That way you are not adding up extra phosphorus. You are not adding extra phosphorus and doing harm to your environment and soil. And also there is almost all every bag of fertilizers, you will see these kinds of informations, which is about what kind of settings to use depending on the manufacturer of the spreader and manufacturer of the fertilizers. It varies, so you have to be very mindful of what you are doing. You just cannot pick up the random spreader and random fertilizers and spray on your yard, because that way you are either you are more likely over fertilizing than under fertilizing. And it's always for the environment, it's always good to under fertilize than over fertilize. So here's the settings depending on your manufacturer of the spreaders, and you follow that, and then you will be very close to your doses and recommendations. All right, so with that, if you have any questions, drop on the chat, and I'll conclude my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj. And now Debbie is going to do some horticulture terminology with us.
Yeah, here, I'm gotta find my little PowerPoint, and I tried to create a poll, so I'm going to try to find it. Let's see. Okay, I think I created one. Let me find it. How do I get it started? I'm sorry, I'm not finding out. Oh, there. Thank you to whomever did that. I appreciate it very much. So what I'm asking you here is we're looking at the term spiracles. So what is the name, or what do you believe is the actual definition of spiracles? A name that describes a fungal description of what a fungus might look like, because they can be in many different forms. Another name for a stomata. Is it a breathing hole, or is it another name for a specific name for flower spikes? And I'll give you a couple, like another minute or so. I know there's more folks that are on that can answer and just take a stab at it. You guys have been very good at all the previous ones. Oh, doesn't have a letter D on there. I apologize on the poll. I thought I had done that right. I'm learning. Technology is really interesting, isn't it? Okay, I'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So we have some of you, 38% say A, 14 say B, 48% say C, and of course I didn't have D, and D is not the correct answer. So I'll stop sharing this. And the actual answer is a breathing hole usually found on the thorax or the abdomen of an insect. So this is some sort of a flying insect, and part of the tracheal system, which is our breathing apparatus, and most of us as animals of the universe. And then we have spiracles. So insects really don't have a nose like what we do. Instead, they will have some spiracles, which are little holes that are attached to their respiratory system, and that's where they breathe. And then over here on this tomato hornworm, you can see the spiracles, these little holes right here are their actual respiratory system. So, and Tamara can add more to this after I give my little description, because she's the main expert at this. But when you're trying to control some different sorts of insects out there, and you're going to use some sort of a horticultural oil, and we say make sure that you get that oil over the insects, and you want to try to cover as much of that insect with that oil as possible. And the reason for that is you're trying to cover up all of these spiracles so that you're essentially giving them a chance where they're not going to be able to breathe. And so that is how the horticultural oils will actually help to control those sorts of insects. Tamara, do you have anything more you would like to add or more detail to this?
Sure, thank you. So that is correct that we're trying to cover the spiracles. Sometimes the oils and soaps also are dissolving that waxy cuticle so that they'll dry out, or that the chemical can actually access the insect. So it's a multi-pronged approach. some insects actually have the ability to close their spiracles as well. So it might make it so that they will take a little bit longer to die. So anyway, insects are endlessly fascinating. They are animals, but they are not like little mammals. They are very different than us, but just very, very fascinating. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Thanks.
Yeah, controlling insects is a question, and a lot of times, and we always talk about horticultural oils or get that question, and I thought that spiracles was important to talk about. So thank you, Tamara. That's all I've got, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you to both of you. Well, cherries are in season now, and even here in the northern part of the state, we're picking cherries. And some people have noticed that their cherries have worms in them, and the cherries also are brown, or they have brown spots that develop quickly and take over the whole fruit. And they want to know what is going on. So I thought I would take this opportunity to tell you what's going on. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, just want to let you know what the problem is here. And it is brown rot. So what happens is we get rain and humidity, and the environmental conditions are just right for disease to build up in some plants. And it's just right for brown rot in cherries. And it starts as a little brown spot and then quickly can take over the entire cherry fruit. So if you have cherries, you may see this. We have a cherry tree here at the Adair County Extension Center, and some of the cherry fruits have these symptoms. They have brown rot. I will tell you that we did spray we sprayed the fruit trees here at the extension office. They got sprayed twice by one of our master gardeners, and they still ended up with brown rot. Okay. Also, worms in cherries can be a problem, and that is likely the cherry fruit fly. We do have a MU fruit production guide. Actually, it's a fruit spray schedule for the homeowner. It does list plum cucurleo as one of the potential insect problems in cherries and stone fruits. But this morning I did some research on this, and I really think it's probably the fruit fly that is the problem. That's probably the worm that we are seeing. The adult lays eggs just under the skin of the cherry, and then they hatch into these little white larvae, and then the larvae feed throughout the cherry. And so when you pick cherry and you go to, you take the pit out and you're going to eat it, and you see a white worm, that's most likely what it is. So that's about all I'm going to do on this. If you have questions, if you want us to identify what the problem may be, feel free to reach out to any of us, and we'll try to help you identify your problem. But just wanted to make you aware that this is what I am seeing here in the Kirksville area. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it over to Katie to talk about planting pumpkins.
So I don't have a PowerPoint right now, but later on in the season, when I do some planting and all of that, I will share different varieties of pumpkins. But now is the time to start thinking about planting your pumpkin, squash, and gourds for those fall displays. So typically we think about the 15th of June until about the 4th of July is the latest that we can plant. And some of it also depends on what varieties you are looking to plant, because some varieties can be 90 days to maturity. Some can be 120 days to maturity. So some of those large varieties like Dill's Atlantic Giant and the moose pumpkins, and those can take 120 days to get ready. So we plant them now later than you might think, because we want them to get ripe later in the season when the temperatures are cooler. And then they will last for Halloween, for our Thanksgiving displays, all of those. And you can, so long as they are harvested in that time, they will last a lot longer. And then you can even keep them, some of them like I do, for years. I've had some last as many as 2 years. So that harvest at the right time really makes a difference. So get out those pumpkin seeds and get started with growing those.
All right, thank you, Katie. And that wraps up for today. I mean, that's all the topics we have. And I'll turn it back over to Debbie now.
Thanks, Jennifer. We had a couple questions actually come into the chat box on Ask Questions here. So I had changed my name to that, so I've got it. So I'll read it. And if the folks that are on can help to answer the question, that I would greatly appreciate it. I know summer is not the greatest time to plant trees, but a local nursery is going out of business. So I find myself with a 5-gallon, 6-foot tall Kwanzaa cherry tree. Any tips for planting and after planting to keep it going through the summer? I know Kwanzaas don't like lots of water, but ... Any suggestions or recommendations from us that we could provide to her as far as how she can work to try to keep that tree going throughout the summer?
I'll jump in. So just make sure that you plant it properly, not too deep at the level that it came. Having some mulch around it would be a really good idea, and making sure that you water it properly. Those are the best tips. You could be watering it every day for the first week or two, and then at least once a week after that. If it looks like it's stressed at all, make sure that you check it to see if it needs water. Of course, with all of that water, you don't want to overwater either. So sticking your finger in the ground to see if it's still wet, to see if it needs water is also a good tip. Those root balls can dry out really fast. So you just really need to make sure that it doesn't have that chance, that the roots have an opportunity to stay moist and be able to get out into the rest of the area. So it'll be a healthy tree.
And something I might add to that is make sure that you dig your hole wide enough. A lot of folks like to put in a lot of compost, a lot of good soil, and replace that hole with that. And if you do, you're just creating its own little private area. It's kind of like it's going to really enjoy that soil much better than going into the native soil that you have there. So we usually recommend using that native soil where you dug up from that hole. You can add in a little bit, not a whole lot, of compost or some organic matter. Again, not a lot. Mix it in well and stick that natural soil back in there. That way those roots will grow out of that hole instead of staying in that hole and just going around in a circle kind of and making a girdle for itself. There was another question that came in. It was about control of poison hemlock. I've had this question come into me a couple times, and usually it's dealing with how to control it in a field. I'm not sure if it is in a field, in a garden somewhere. Does anybody have any suggestions or recommendations about controlling poison hemlock? I know that it's kind of across the state now.
Debbie, this is Justin. There's a number of different herbicides that can be effective. A lot of them are, so there's combinations of 2,4-D and triclopyr. I'm going to put in the chat box here, but chloropillarid and triclopyr, trade names Transline and Pathfinder. They might be a little bit harder to find right at a big box store. You might have to order some of them online. It looks like Tamara has a link in there. I'll just go ahead and drop one in as well, but there's about 5 or 6 different herbicides that are labeled for poison hemlock. So those should be effective, and just make sure you read the label, follow all the language on the label appropriately, and applying before, if you can get the application before they're setting seed, that would be most effective.
Thank you for that. And then another question that came in is, would or could chlorosis affect maples? And then she elaborated a little bit later, stating that in early fall, much sooner than when leaves should be changing, the leaves turn yellow and then drop from the tree. Any thoughts about that? I know we've had some very interesting weather things that have occurred over the past couple of years. And I know one year we had early leaf drop. Does anybody want to kind of address that?
So maple can be affected by chlorosis, and chlorosis can also be induced by periods of heavy rain. So extreme periods of heavy rain could also be a cause of chlorosis. I'm not necessarily sure what would be going on exactly right before or kind of early fall before they would normally be dropping, but maple can be susceptible to iron chlorosis.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when the weather is overly dry as well, and we don't think to water our trees, they can have a tendency to drop their leaves way early as well, because they want to protect the newer leaves versus the older leaves, kind of like a mom would want to protect its child. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Okay, Tamara, can you do me a favor and drop into the chat box a link on where people can send questions ahead of time? So that would be very helpful to do that. And then what I'd like to do is show everyone, I'll share my screen again here, how to save the chat in the chat box. We've had lots of great information that went into the chat box. So this was from today, and I took this as a snippet. Now, if you go down to the chat where you're going to send a message to either the entire group or to someone personal, you can click down that little caret and select on the name. And if you want to save all the information in the chat, then go over to these three dots, click on the three dots, and then you will see something that says Save Chat. Click on the Save Chat, and then it can be saved to wherever you would like to put it onto your computer. You could save it to your desktop, or you can put it anywhere in a folder where you might remember where that is. And that way you can save a lot of these different links that we post down into the chat box. And then the other thing I'd like to mention to you again is just to have up on the screen here, all of us that are here, we're very happy to answer your questions. And I believe that Tamara's already dropped down a link on where you can find this map and get all of our email addresses. At least I know she does that on a regular basis each week. Remember that you can watch us on YouTube. Just type into the YouTube search with MUIPM, and you'll find our snippets. And you'll find the town hall recordings if you'd like to go back and listen to them again. Or if you would, you're somewhere, you're not at your computer, but you got a phone, you can still listen in on your phone if you'd like to. All those fun things, we're trying to make us as readily and easily available to all of you as much as possible. And then again, we'll be back for the next couple of weeks, of course, on a Wednesday from 1 to noon. And here again is the ipm.missouri.edu. And then it is say town halls. We've changed our name, but we're still listed as a town hall on this website. And then click under Garden Hour, and you should be able to find our information. And with that, I'll go back to the screen. I'll leave that up for another minute or two in case someone wants to jot down an email address. We're very happy to have you with us today. We hope to see you next week, and have a great week, and see you later.